This is Dr. David Pomeroy, your host on ADHD Focus. I wanted to remind you that the show is not intended to be a recommendation for diagnosis or treatment of any condition for any specific person. Please consult your mental health professional or doctor managing your ADHD or mental health issues about any diagnosis or treatment-related information that you hear on the show. Refer your ADHD provider to the show if he or she would like more information. Hello, this is Dr. David Pomeroy, your host of ADHD Focus, and I welcome you to another chapter in our ongoing look at various issues with ADHD. Today I'm very excited to be able to talk to Don Baker, who is a therapist in Seattle, whom I've known for probably close to a dozen years or more. And Don is an excellent facilitator of groups, and he has a different kind of approach to helping folks and couples with ADD. He says he received his own ADD diagnosis in 1997 and became a counselor in the state of Washington here in 1998. And he's worked for the past 20 years with folks with ADHD. So, Don, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Dave. Pleasure to be here. Good to talk with you.
So we're talking today about relationships and ADHD, and I don't see much more distressing kinds of things to me than someone coming in and a relationship's on the rocks, or it's pretty evident that there's been a lot of problems. And so I think it's really important to help people with and also their partners, spouses without ADD understand that there's hope, but it also takes some work to figure things out.
Yeah, Dave, I think that's a great place to start. And in my experience, doing what I've been doing for 20 years or so, there is hope. And in the beginning, it's if you're in a relationship right now with somebody, and it's rocky at all. Just I'm not biased in that I think that every relationship is going to work out. But if you both are committed to some extent to turning this thing around, it can absolutely be done. And it takes a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. And we talked a bit before we began recording here that I certainly see the main trigger that brings one person in to either get diagnosis or their child, and then, well, it's obvious dad has it too, and then how much it's affecting things comes out, is that crisis ultimatum by somebody that you got to do something here.
Totally. Yeah, I think you let me look over these questions, and when I read this, basically, I call it being court-ordered to therapy, coaching, group work by somebody who in the relationship who is non-ADHD. And, this isn't just in partner-spouse kind of relationships. This is parents and kids. And to be court-ordered, like to be like I'm leaving or else kind of a thing, puts the ADHD person, at least in my experience, in kind of a one-down position, and it's a tough trough to dig out of, right? And
oh, yeah.
I feel, and I don't know if you notice this too, but it's almost like the level of commitment somebody has when they're court-ordered to come and see me, I'd say it's less than somebody who finds me on their own. Do you think that's true?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. And I think the double bind here is the person with ADD now just diagnosed is scrambling to try to find how to fix this. And so,
totally.
Medicines didn't fix it. No, I didn't say they were going to. And their hope is, within 3 or 4 weeks, things are going to be better. And at the same time, the spouse thinks, you've been taking this medicine for 2 months and you're still forgetting things and you don't listen to me. And And unless there's some really good support for each of them individually as well as a couple, then things are unlikely to really work out.
Yeah, I think, when somebody comes in, let's say they're not court ordered, they come in on their own volition and they're committed to the process, relationships can be really kind of tenuous and fragile. And it's, somebody can take meds and have an incredible treatment strategy and be making some pretty big wins, in my opinion. But because the relationship is so fragile that, the spouse is just like so basically over it, that something can trigger kind of a backslide, or you know what I'm saying? And it's almost we were talking about this before we started talking here, and we were talking about trust and how trust gets eroded, right?
Yep. And I'm just thinking about one thing that of a single entity of ADD that has the most impact on a relationship is what Bill Dodson calls the rejection sensitivity.
Totally.
Where a little remark, have you emptied the dishwasher yet? Bang, the person with ADD just explodes.
Yeah.
And 10 minutes later thinks, well, that was kind of silly. Well, apologizing doesn't have the same impact as the explosion. And that's an intrinsic part of ADD. It's not something that usually the general first-line medications help, and anger management stuff doesn't help because it comes out of nowhere.
It does.
So that's a really important part for people to understand, but also look at what they can do about it. Well, we talked about. Go ahead.
Oh, let me interject really quick. I'm glad you brought that up, and I was just thinking, when we get to kind of strategies and how to best unpack and be more strategic with this, RSD, rejection sensitivity, is, to me, the way Bill Dodson talks about it, it's the perception of being rejected. It isn't even necessarily there. And like you say, you can pick it up in a tone, but but this hypersensitivity that we as ADD folks live with, that we pick up on threats that don't exist, we overreact, it makes, so it's like there's a hypervigilance that we can develop in relationships, and it's crazy.
Yeah, and I do think that certainly of the kind of people with ADD are hypersensitive to a lot of things. My experience, noise is number one, and that means also tone of voice is really important. Sensitivity emotionally, and that tone of voice. And I've seen kids here turn to mom and say, "Why are you yelling at me?" Well, the mom hasn't raised volume, but the third time you ask something, the tone of voice is going to be different. So it's easy to take that. So we talked about the kind of the basic steps in terms of what can help, and certainly a good, accurate diagnosis has to be a starting point. And oftentimes there will be other co-occurring conditions of maybe an underlying generalized anxiety disorder or depression or other things that fit into it. But that starting the person with ADD on a good foundation of treatment is number one.
Yep. Yes, absolutely. And I wholeheartedly agree. And I was talking to you about the fact that I looked back at Melissa Orloff's one of her books, and she outlines a process of the 3 stages of healing. And the first stage is actually getting past denial. So overcoming denial in resistance in both partners, right? So maybe, it's interesting, and you probably run into this too. It's like somebody can get the diagnosis, and there may be kind of that huge relief, kind of looking back on our life and saying, oh, yeah.
That explains it, yeah.
But in my experience, I get to sit and work with people as they move through this, and it's like there can be a huge wall of denial around it, not only not understanding exactly what ADHD is, but how that may have or may impact their lives going forward. And and then to have a partner kind of come into therapy, and you talk about this diagnosis and the manifestations, and tons of denial on their part too, because ultimately, if you don't have anything else to attribute it to, if it's a hidden disability, you're going to attribute it to somebody's moral flaw, their character, like they're just a bad person.
Or you just really don't care about me, or those kinds of things.
Exactly, yeah.
And you mentioned that the second part of her 3-step process is the hard work, and I think it is hard work, and a couple needs to realize this isn't, 2 months and the medicines are working and everything's going to be fine, we'll read a few books. And certainly the spouse of the person diagnosed with ADHD has probably a lot of resentments, a lot of emotions to deal with. In terms of helping the relationship, the spouse needs to have her or his own therapy, and just to work on feelings, not toward ADD or anything else, because it's absolutely normal to have a lot of strong emotions built up.
Yeah, absolutely. I always kind of look at it like the talons of ADHD, and the longer folks are together, the tougher this is to deconstruct, right?
Because there's certainly maybe other resentment kinds of things that don't have anything to do with it, but they get all lumped in the same thing.
Yes.
But then also the person with ADHD has a lot of emotions, either anxiety about relationship and all the stuff of realizing, oh, I wish I'd known this 15 years ago, kind of thing. And then there's, each person's having some chance to do their own work on their resentments and feelings, but then coming together to start to deal with it. So what steps do you, or how do you start with a couple comes in, we've got diagnosis here, and we're trying to figure out how to put things together. What do you start with?
One of my go-to, lack of a better word, Peg Dawson wrote a book a couple years ago called Smart But Scattered, and it's called The Success Guides for Adults. And so what I like to do is it's kind of a little bit of a quiz. It's a little bit of psychoeducation. But what's cool about it is you can have a couple sit down. You can kind of go through the traits that are kind of most problematic in the relationship, and you can clarify kind of the neurobiological underpinning of those. Like take it out of the realm of this being a moral flaw. What's great about what Peg Dawson does, it isn't necessarily for ADHD folks. It's about executive skill traits that every human being has strengths and challenges. So what I like to do is I like to take it out of the realm of somebody being bad and good here, like that the non-ADD person is not necessarily the good one, and the ADD person isn't necessarily bad. That we are, you look at neurodiversity and you look at the fact that every brain is unique. And it's kind of cool to kind of tease this out and say, okay, this is what I'm good at. This is what you're good at. This is what I'm not so great at. Here's where you kind of suck too. And it's how do we want to begin to work with this? So what this does is it diffuses a lot of the tension right out of the gate. And what I do is I like to give a lot of homework with this so they can go home and have conversations about this and begin to get strategic with how they want this to be different. And my objective isn't necessarily, I don't tell them that I want you guys to start talking, but one of the outcomes often is that they do. They start to have conversations about this. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be peaceful, right?
Right. And that, I think, gets to the other side, that's the kind of, or one of the other sides, the couples communication part, because I think many people have fallen into a trap of either blaming or pulling up stuff from 3 years ago. And anytime somebody's saying, well, you do this, you do that, that's not going to work. And it's getting around to what I think is almost an abnormal model in terms of what people grow up with. I think whatever, I feel this, I would like that.
Yep.
And that definitely takes practice to
God.
do.
And just think about this. I mean, like I think about the most inattentive ADD person that I work with. And so to remember those cues and those skills, to be able to retrieve those in the moment, bring those up in a conversation with a spouse, when there's like emotional volatility going on, it's tough. It's almost like you need it you tattooed on your forearm or have cue cards or something, right? To stay with that, I mean, that's a tough thing to actually have a voice and a self when, because of hypersensitivity or whatever, you've retreated and withdrawn, and now all of a sudden we're saying, hey, just stand up and be seen in this relationship. It's very hard.
Yeah, and particularly, as you say, in the midst of the emotional thrash of things, that is very difficult to step back. And people I've seen who have been successful, one or the other of them can say, wait a second, things are getting too overheated here. Let's step back, take a little bit, let's get back together in half an hour and go through some of these steps we've been working on. So if one or the other, either one can identify, hold it, we're going to derail here, that really makes a difference.
Yeah, I this. I'm in a relationship with somebody who's ADHD too, and when I was diagnosed, there were no resources, right? And it was like it was just just a shot in the dark trying to find support. And so basically my practice is based on creating the things that I always wish existed, and and I just remember for me in the beginning, the RSD thing was so impactful. Tone of voice would make me retreat, and I'd sulk and hurt feelings, and there was so much complexity to it. But I think what's cool these days is there's so many excellent resources and ways of explaining this to people, right? And it's like, and what I love to do is arm people with some of this information, so they don't have to go through what we went through years ago.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Maybe navigating a little bit easier. Not like it's going to be super easy.
Yeah, no, the resources definitely have increased, and I was only 5 years behind you in terms of diagnosis, and I don't think I was steered to any resources. It was, this medicine's supposed to help, and here you go. Yeah. And there was no in these books or anything, or let's have your spouse understand it. It was, the medicine ought to help you, and you're on your own. And that doesn't work. One thing that it just occurred to me as we're talking about the emotional one thing or another, and this gets into the field of shame and shame work, that Brené Brown is certainly the name that comes to me in that, looking at the fact that probably all of us carry shame from these old tapes and growing up, and as that gets rekindled from anything in a relationship, that affects even more things that are going on.
Yeah. Hey, I've got a quote here. Can I read this real quick? This
Sure.
is written by an ADD spouse, a non-ADHD spouse, and one of the reasons I want to read it is because it aligns with what you're saying. And this was a testimonial from Melissa Orloff's book, and this person says, "So I cried. As a non-ADHD spouse, I felt understood and validated for the first time. At the same time, the author took me to task on my behavior and responses. It was the first time. So the book gave a name to what happened happened, how it started, how it was falling apart, the state of crisis. It explained my pain perfectly, and it forced me to squarely face my husband's pain. And I think that's really important. It's like I watch this. It's like back to the point where you say early family of origin experiences or stuff that's happened in our lives breed shame, right? And for at some point in the process to be able to step back and say, this guy's a jerk, but to pull back and say, I can see why she is hurting, right? It's not like I need to take care of that for them, but I can see that we both are in pain.
Yeah, I think each respecting the other's pain is a huge point. That's a real good one. Thank you.
Yeah.
So how does the group process work? Because you're one of the only people I know who not only does individual/couples therapy, but okay, let's get 5 couples with one spouse with ADD and see what happens. How'd you get?
It was a gamble for me. It was one of those things where I thought, I'm going to give this a try. And so what I started to do, I would do, I think, 5 couples, so 10, maybe 6 couples. And I would plan a day. I'd divide it up into different sections. But the beginning was where everybody, ADD spouse and non-ADD spouse or partner, whatever, in the same room together. And everybody's kind of interested. It's kind of a surface thing, good, let's get acquainted. And we kind of process what are some of the things that work, that don't work for you guys. But I think the thing that I found in all the groups that I do, whether they're just, for ADD folks or for couples, there's like this special sauce, this thing where somebody doesn't have to be going through what you're going through. But, going back to the comment you made at the beginning of our talk about hope, it's like you can look at another couple and you can say, oh, man, they are really screwed up. Or, I can learn some stuff from them. But there's something that happens where it's disarming, right? Where for the first time, maybe one or both of you are able to sit and talk about what's real. And with other people who there's so many things you don't have to say, they just get it, right?
Yeah.
One of the problems I had with the groups is I absolutely love doing them, but I just didn't have the time to do the follow-up, and I think that's a piece that if I had more time, I would do that. I think that would really benefit these folks.
So when you do the groups, is it, okay, we're all going to get together on a Saturday, or is it a 6 weeks worth? How do you work that?
I did it both ways, and what I found worked better was to get together on a Saturday and to have, say, 4 or 5 hours, break for lunch, and to do different cohorts where, have all ADD people together, all non-ADD people together, to switch partners and that kind of stuff. But I found having a chunk of time worked a lot better for continuity than, having a break, week in, week out.
Yeah, and then you're great. We had this hour, and now we go back to the same stuff.
Totally. Yeah.
And you end up rerunning the same tapes that are the problem. So, in terms of resources, good ones, and there are books, and I know there are webinars. I've always found the ADD Etude magazine has excellent webinars and articles on it. And you'd mentioned in some of the things you sent me before on books that you found particularly helpful.
I love Attitude. It's a great website, and if people are interested, I've got a Facebook page. I know it's not a cool thing these days, but if you are on Facebook still, it's Facebook's /Unpacking ADHD, and I post on there every day, and I put a lot of different resources on there about couples. For somebody who's living with ADHD beyond my Facebook page, I like it, and I don't know how you feel about this book, but Craig Sermon wrote a book called Fast Minds a few years ago.
Yeah, I'd not heard of that one.
I love it. I love it because he does a lot of great education in the first half of the book. The second half of the book is all about strategies. And for somebody with ADHD, again, Smart but Scattered, The Adult Success Guide by Peg Dawson. I love that. Those are kind of good entrees, I think. If you're not a reader, I think they're both on audio, so you can listen to those in the car, whatever. If you're a partner of, to me, the go-to resource is Gina Para's book,
Yes.
Is It You, Me, or Adult ADD? Do you like that one too?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Yeah. I think that's a good sorting out. Is it your family of origin, whatever? Is it mine? Or is this ADD and we have to figure out what's the kind of funny part and what's the real important part?
Exactly. Yeah, she calls it like getting off the roller coaster. She has great metaphors in there. And then for both of you, I like Melissa Orloff's couple different books, The ADHD Effect on Marriage and The Couple's Guide to Thriving with ADHD. Both of those I think are great. I've actually used those in couple sessions. We'll use a chapter a week in there. And Melissa also does a seminar that I'll refer some of my couples to, and it's an international audience, which is kind of cool, right? But if you go to Orloff's website, this is ADHDmarriage.com. Check that seminar out too. I think that's a pretty good resource.
Yeah, some of the other ones I like. Pretty much anything by Thomas Brown, a psychologist of 40-plus years experience in ADHD. And he wrote one, Smart But Stuck, that really looked at a lot of the emotional components. And his latest one, which incorporates that other one as well, is called Outside the Box. And he just has a great way of putting the pieces together and helping people see where they came from and how you can build a different box, I guess. Another good online resource is totallyadd.com, Rick Green's website, and with his background in broadcasting, he basically makes small documentaries, some of them larger, but he knows to break them up in parts. And he has ones on relationships as well as a number of other things about ADD. So it's something a couple can watch together and get talking, and Rick's a comedian, so there's always an extra little twist to it.
He's a funny guy. Yeah, I like what you just said there, Dave. I think many of the couples I work with, I don't know about you, but will do books on tape, listen to them in the car together. I love to hear that people are willing to kind of access the information, not have to talk about it, but just listen to it together. I think that's kind of cool. They're getting it
together. Well, as I've often found out in doing these shows, we're at the end of our half an hour of time, and I think, Don, we probably have some more to be able to talk about in the future, and hopefully we can do that. My guest today has been Don Baker, a therapist in Seattle with 20 years of personal experience and professional experience with ADHD, and we've been talking about relationships and ADHD. And I think that the two takeaways for me is, number one, there's hope. It is possible to work through this and the relationship come out probably even stronger. But the second thing it takes is commitment on the part of each partner to do some individual work and then work on it together to understand not only the nature of ADHD, but how you can work with it and weave it into part of your relationship in a positive way. So, Don, thanks so much for your time and for being here.
You bet, Dave. Thanks so much for having me come on. It's a pleasure talking with you again.
So everyone listening, thanks for listening today to ADHD Focus. This is your host, Dr. Dave Pomeroy, wishing you well, and we'll talk to you next time.